We're going to move into the other category, above average. Okay. And I'm going to start. What do you say we start here? I don't know. Let's take a look at these. There's a great graphic, by the way, the B tier offensive line. And it's nice to see the Chicago Bears up in there. A lot of people were probably expecting to see them in the average category, but not so fast, my friend. I'm going to start with the Raiders. I'm going to start with the Raiders in the above average category here.
Yeah.
I love the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, I grew up as a Raiders fan with my old man, and my younger brother works for Allegiant Stadium out there. He's in sales. If you need to get a beautiful suite to go watch the Raiders, or if there's an artist you want to go watch, contact Howie Long with the Raiders. That's my younger brother. He'll get you squared away. Okay. Above average Raiders. Colton Miller, left tackle. He's like the pillar on which you can build things. And when I look at these above average, and there's above average, there's solid, then there will be elite. Above average, solid, and elite has at least one player where I'm like, this is a dude. You can base your offensive identity and scheme around him. And I think that Colton Miller is that guy. The other guy I really like is Jackson Powers-Johnson, obviously an Oregon Duck. But when you've got a guy on the outside and a guy in the middle who can really kick ass, I love that. Alex Kappa led the league in some stats that were not very good. But one thing that you will always get from Alex Kappa is reliability. He's always in the lineup. And you and I have played with guys who find a way to stay in the lineup all the time. And to be quite honest, I wasn't judging them on their level of play, but I was like, damn, this dude is tough as nails. He's smart. He has the ability to get in there every single time. That's what they have with Alex Kappa, Chip Kelly, 12 personnel, 2 tight ends. They got Ashton Genty. They're going to run the football. I anticipate a ton of down blocks from Colton Miller with the Raiders. Moving on to the Chicago Bears, and then stop me after the Bears, okay? Because we were told to speed up. Bears, Braxton Jones at left tackle. That's a question mark. Are they going to go with Ozzie Trapillo out there? Trapillo, haven't figured it out yet. Joe Thuney was the big name, big ticket item at left guard spot. I'll get into him in a minute. Drew Dahlman, Jonah Jackson at right guard, Darnell Wright, the first-round pick from Tennessee, who is continuing slowly but surely to become the right tackle that people wanted. The bad taste in people's mouths about Darnell Wright is that they didn't draft Jalen Carter. And, that's okay. And kudos to Howie Roseman and the Eagles, but we got Darnell Wright in Chicago. Joe Thuney's a huge ad, not because he's the most dominant left guard in football, but because he has positional versatility. And if somebody goes down, he can throw his hat in the ring as a guy who can get it done at a near Pro Bowl level at either tackle or either guard spot. A real rare wild card joker type player. Braxton Jones has gotten better and better. He's dealt with some health issues, but they got most of the health issues out of the lineup there. Kevin Jenkins was a guy that was really good, but he just wasn't available.
Correct.
And, you hate to see that. So what do you think about my above average pick for the Chicago Bears offensive line?
No, I think they're in the above average group as well. They're better than average. I think the big question mark, and I'm a huge Braxton Jones fan, been a big Braxton Jones fan since I followed him at the Senior Bowl. He just got to be a little bit more consistent. And you talk about Darnell Wright, I think Ben Johnson coming over will really highlight his skill set because he's going to want to pound people into submission. Well, that's what Darnell Wright was known for at the University of Tennessee, pounding guys into submission. I think the biggest question mark, and we had this conversation, Kyle, is the high price free agent they brought in Drew Dahlman, just because of the scheme fit. Now, again, Drew Dahlman is one of the brighter centers in all of football. He's also one of the most athletic centers in football. He comes from a zone scheme, and this is a little bit X's and O's me and Kyle are talking about. And
we've done this a few times.
Yeah. And the zone scheme, right? It's all about athletic ability and being able to be tethered together and being able to climb to that second level and get that linebacker. And Drew Dahlman was one of the better players to do that. Well, Ben Johnson, by nature, is more of a G scheme, power running game, right? We want to run power. We want to run a counter. We want double teams. We want guard pull. We want to literally take your will. So that is the interesting thing when you talk about this puzzle with the O-line. Where does Drew Dahlman fit in it? Again, he's a consummate pro, one of the better centers in football. Ben Johnson's a bright offensive coordinator. They will make it work. I just wonder because from his skill set, he's always been a really good zone guy. Now he goes into a G scheme. I can't wait to see how that works out.
I think it's important to point out that like you're saying, there's certain things that guys can do at the offensive line position that lends itself to running certain schemes. We know that Ben Johnson wants to tailor make the offense for Caleb Williams, but we also know that there are offensive coordinators and head coach types that have tailor made their run game to what their offensive linemen do well. We saw it with the Buccaneers. And obviously they've got some talent in the running back room, but they've got a good offensive line as well. And Liam Cohen, I give him credit for changing things up to be able to work towards your strengths. I would hope that Ben Johnson can find some things that an athletic guy like Drew Dahlman can succeed at. But I don't think it's all going to be mash it up style play with a guy like Joe Thuney who can move outside, who's fabulous in the screen game. They're going to get creative. And I mean, I think that with Darnell Wright, you will have the leading edge of the sword there at the right tackle spot.
For sure.
Like we saw with Penei Sewell, a lesser version of that, where you put the dent in the line and let the other guys be athletes. I'm not concerned about it because they're good players. And Ben Johnson's a great coach. Okay, we're going to move on here to the Packers. Rasheed Walker at the left tackle spot, Aaron Banks, Elgton Jenkins, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom. The one guy that I really like here or two guys, Elgton Jenkins and Zach Tom. Great football players. And they've got some great flows there in terms of the hair on the offensive line for the Green Bay Packers. It brings me back to the days of watching our guy Josh Sitton used to play there. New faces in the offensive line room. Aaron Banks, very expensive guy. If we're going to call DJ more expensive, we might as well call Aaron Banks really expensive as well. Mike Renner wasn't thrilled about that deal as a Green Bay Packer shareholder, may I say. But, this group is above average. They've got a lot of positional versatility. And, if somebody gets hurt, they can slide guys in there. What do you see from the Packers group?
Yeah, this would probably be a group I'd put in the average. I think the big question mark is a guy that you don't even have on here, and I think that's an issue, Jordan Morgan, right? Because he didn't start a majority of the year last year. They were trying to figure out what his position was, and they took him in the first round, Kyle. So
they comped him to me, by the way. Did you know that? I was his comp. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you guys both had that interchangeable where you could play
guard
outside
tackle
and inside. Yeah. So, and then this year they took Anthony Belton, which they rarely don't take beefier offensive linemen. So to me, it's like he's a big human being. So I'm like, so is Matt LaFleur changing up his philosophy? Because that was a question me and you talked about yesterday on HQ, right? When it came to the Green Bay Packers, like what's their identity?
Yeah.
Because they're changing the way they draft their offensive linemen. Are they changing their identity? Are they going to be a team that's led by Josh Jacobs? And you would think the way that they drafted, it seems like that. But it's like you're paying Jordan Love $55 million. You can't be a running back-led team when you're paying the quarterback $55 million a year. Now, obviously, you want to put weapons around him so it takes pressure off him. But when you're paying a guy that type of money, it has to be quarterback-led. So it'll be interesting to see this team and this offensive line more specifically gel. And where does Jordan Morgan fit in this scenario? Because you spent a first-round pick on a guy, and then you took a offensive tackle in the second round in Anthony Belton this year. It'll be interesting to see how this offensive line flips and flops.
All right, so that's our Packers discussion, and obviously a lot of question marks there in Green Bay, whether it be Jair Alexander, the next step for Jordan Love, Hafley's ability to continue to be a nuisance as the defensive coordinator, and like you said, Matt LaFleur and their offensive identity. So moving on here to the Ravens, and I'll tell you what, we know their offensive identity. We know what this team's about. And yes, there was some red flags last year. Well, I'll say this, a lot of red flags last year in protection early on, a lot of like, oh my God, is Lamar going to survive the season? Well, they settled in. They played a high level of ball, and I'm looking at the right guard there, Daniel Faalele, who was a mountain of a man, and there were some issues in protection there at the beginning of the year, but he covered his bum with that run blocking, and Roger Rosengarten is a fantastic young right tackle. Ronnie Stanley, the stalwart there at the left tackle spot, and Andrew Voorhees. This is a group that not a lot changes, which I really weigh into the equation. And with what their quarterback can do, he can make a lot of groups look above average. So that's where they end up in my rankings.
Yeah, when you look at them, you kind of compare them to like the Dallas Cowboys when it comes to the offensive line. They just develop guys really well. And then they'll let guys leave in free agency. Like Patrick McCarry, we talked about him earlier with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Kevin Zeitler was another guy we talked about earlier. Like they just develop offensive linemen really well. Daniel Faalele, at Minnesota was an offensive tackle. They moved that big body into guard, and it seems like a more natural position for him. Now, you knew there was going to be an acclimation period because that's a big switch up from tackle to guard. And we talked about it, Kyle. It's all fastballs in the inside. So he had some struggles with protection, but he got better as the year went on. I really love Andrew Voorhees. And I felt like if he didn't get hurt in the process, his last year at USC, he probably would have been a second-round pick. And they ended up getting him in like the 6th or 7th. I think he's going to be one of the better guards in football this year. Tyler Linderbaum is already one of the better centers in football. Ronnie Stanley showed last year he can be healthy, and he's one of the consummate pros at left tackle. And I love Roger Rosengarten from Washington, and they took him a few years ago. He's a mauler in the run game, has flexibility to play left tackle as well, but he's going to be their stalwart at right tackle. So we know, like you said, Kyle, the identity. They're going to run the football. Lamar's going to do his thing, and they develop offensive linemen really well in Baltimore.
Okay, here we go. This one might piss some people off, but there's a lot of flexibility here with this grade. This is one of those grades that I put on your desk and I say, come see me, because it may not be the final grade, okay? This group can swing into the solid category. My God, if they hit a home run with their draft pick, they could swing into the elite category. So right now I have the Kansas City Chiefs penciled in with Jalen Moore at left tackle, because we don't know the situation with old Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. We got Mike Caliendo at the left guard spot. That's subject to change depending on what we get out of Josh Simmons. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Jawan Taylor. Those are the ones that we pretty much know. And even Jawan Taylor is a guy who could move off the spot depending on how our young buck gets going. And you know what? Jawan Taylor's one of those guys, and you know, bless his heart, as we say in the South, there's certain things that you just know about Jawan Taylor. He's going to get some pre-snap penalties, some alignment issues, and at times he could get beat like anybody. Hey, those defensive linemen get paid too. So if I'm Andy Heck, I'm trying to find a way to maximize my skill. I think that Josh Simmons is a highly skilled player. If he's healthy enough to go after that devastating patellar injury, we're going to see him out there in one of these spots, either left tackle, right tackle, or we could kick in one of these guys to guard. So Chiefs above average. Obviously, they lost Joe Thuney, but they've got a guy by the name of Patrick Mahomes. Andy Reid is their coach. He can make a lot of guys look really good. And I love Andy Heck, the offensive line coach there.
Yeah, so this one, I don't think you're wrong just because of the potential in putting them in above average. Because if Josh Simmons is healthy, this will be a more than above average offensive line.
Yeah.
And I do believe Jalen Moore will kick out the right and they'll bench Jawan Taylor because he has just struggled when it comes to, you know, procedure penalties, whether he's lined up in the backfield, jumping off sides, holding. It's been a constant struggle for him. Jalen Moore is a guy that has high upside, right? He is a guy that started to have the games for the San Francisco 49ers last year, and he was Trent's at right tackle. Double. Yes, and he's moonlighted at right tackle because he's always been the swing guy. So he could move the right tackle. And again, this is all incumbent on the health of Josh Simmons. And then your boy, another key part, and you talked about Mike Caliendo, he's going to be in a battle too with your boy Kingsley. Like,
yes,
Kingsley has the ability to slide into guard, and then this group could go into the solid category. But again, it's all incumbent. And I think you put them in the perfect spot, Kyle, because there's a lot of what ifs, right? What if Simmons is healthy? What if Kingsley takes a step at guard? Right? Can Jalen Moore play right tackle if Simmons is healthy? Like, there's what if, so I don't think you can put them in the solid group yet. But I think they're rightfully placed in the above average group just because of the potential of what the group can be.
Okay, another potential above average team. And, you know, I'm high on the potential here. The San Francisco 49ers. They've got their quarterback signed. They've got Christian McCaffrey back. They've got George Kittle signed up, and they've got a couple names that we really like here. Okay, the first guy that I'm going to talk about is not Trent Williams. It's right guard Dominic Puni. Dominic Puni jumps off the film, and he has since like season week 1. I have him picked as one of my breakout players, and you know, all rookie team, yeah, that's great. But when he goes from all rookie team to all pro, that's when he really broke out, right? So I think that this is the year for him. And the big if is that left tackle spot. If the big fella can stay healthy, this team is dangerous because they've got that X-Men power at the left tackle spot, run and pass. Trent Williams has that effect, and he is the ageless wonder. when he is on the field.
So this one, we're on opposite sides, Kyle. And we had this conversation earlier this offseason. I think they're in the danger close category. And I say that because of some of the things you alluded to. Where is Trent Williams, right? When it comes to, again, he dealt with not only injuries, but some personal stuff off the field last year. And even though it seems like he's defied the laws of time, eventually Father Time is undefeated, right? So who's his heir apparent? The San Francisco 49ers decided not to draft his heir apparent. And I think that's the biggest question for me is
they got rid of
the thing that plagued them last year. The thing that plagued them last year was depth. And we talked about that with the Cleveland Browns, right? And the Steelers earlier in the show. The depth for the 49ers offensive line, it's not there. So what happens if Trent does get hurt or Colton McKivitz gets hurt? Like, who's their swing guy? Who's gonna be the heir apparent to Jake Brindle? Because he's getting up there in age as well. And he's struggled at times the last couple of years. So when you look at what Kyle Shanahan does in that zone scheming and running the football, they've always had a decent O-line. But I would say from a standpoint of what's on paper currently this year, this might be one of, and again, with no disrespect in saying this, as far as the names and the guys and the depth, this might be one of the weaker groups they've had in the last few years when you talk about a team that's constantly going to the NFC Championship game. So
it's just
I think they're more in the
it's not the same
close.
as we're used to. It's not the same.
Correct. The depth is just not there.
But the identity remains the same if Trent Williams can stretch the play side of that zone game and Dominic Puny can help the backside tackle Colton McKivitz on the B block and get to the second level. If those two things can get accomplished, you could line a blocking dummy up at center and left guard, and we would get 5 to 8 yards. I truly believe that. As a guy who played right guard and I watched Puny, there are blocks that he makes, sometimes 2 blocks using one defender as a human shield, that I'm just like, holy shit. And obviously the Trent Williams stuff. So if you can get those two in combination and keep Trent on the field, they can play their way into this above average category. I hear what you're saying. If one guy breaks a shoelace, we are in danger close. Real quickly, I'll go through the Jets and the Rams. We'll go through the Rams really quickly. A lot of injuries that they dealt with last year, and when they dealt with them, depth was a real issue, and they had a revolving door in a few spots. Havenstein, when he's in the lineup, they do a good job of settling down, recognizing pressures, being able to pick up some of those external issues. And with that being the guy who's in Matt Stafford's field of vision, it's imperative that he's on the field because he's the guy that sees things, gets things shut down. You got anything for the Rams before I go on to the Jets?
Yeah, Coleman Shelton is back. Obviously, the Jonah Jackson, acquisition didn't work. They traded him to the Chicago Bears. Steve Avila, to me, is a guy that really has to hold this together because they kind of moonlighted him at potentially playing center. Then they moved him back to guard. And he's a hoss in the run game, right? But at times struggles in pass protection. He's a guy that really has to come on because this, Kyle, that's a physical running outfit. They love those duo plays, those double teams up front. They get movement on them. And that's what Sean McVay is known for. He's going to be a physical run. And even though he's from the quote-unquote Shanahan tree, he switches up his run game a little bit more. He's more duo action type run game. So to your point, Rob Havenstein has to stay healthy because he's the wily vet on this team. Kevin Dotson's going to be a good player. And Alaric Jackson, they just paid him and gave him a nice extension. He's a really good young player.
He's a good player. Well. Under the radar, really good tackle. Which, as you know, there's always a handful of those guys in the league that just never get the love. And you would think a guy playing in LA would get the love, but he doesn't. So I'm glad you gave Alaric Jackson some love. A team that I think isn't getting enough love and could be in a tier above this, but I've got him as above average, is the New York Jets. Olu Fashion, who can play football. John Simpson.
He can.
John Simpson's a face eater. Elijah Barron Tucker, when he's healthy, he is a great football player. Armand Membu, I think, was one of the highest upside guys that was just drafted in this year's draft. And I think that in conjunction with Aaron Glenn's demeanor and identity as a football coach, this group and their quarterback will run the football. And if you can run the football, it's like landing body blows in boxing. It opens the head up. And then that's what we can see the Georgia All-State pitcher Justin Fields start throwing that thing down the field. I like the Jets in the above average category this year.
Yeah, crazy stat for you, Kyle. Their oldest starter is 27 years old up front. That's John Simpson. The average age of their starting five, the five you have up there, is 23.5 years old. I don't think any team has that in the NFL right now. So you're talking about a young group that 4 of the 5 guys were there last year, have played together. Armand Bimbu is a first-round pick. You talked about it, the high upside and his ability to move guys with his athletic ability to cut off on the backside. And then you got to talk about the scheme that's coming over. It's a Detroit Lions type scheme with Tanner Enstring, right? So they're going to run the football. You talked about Justin Fields. He essentially becomes a running back in the open field, and he's tough to bring down. Yep. So that's going to be their identity. They have a 3-headed monster at running back. They're going to run the football in New York. I really love, and this is not me being a homer, I really love this young offensive line.